NTV.
All right, welcome back and many thanks for staying with us right here on Morning at NTV. My name is Romeo Busiku. Would like to kick off today's Kickstarter conversation by talking about the NRM elections and what they mean for the 2021 polls. We are going to be analyzing the Central Executive Committee elections that transpired yesterday. What were the major takeaways? And to discuss that and a lot more, I'm joined by Maurice Rakakamba. He's the Chief Executive Officer for the Agency for Transformation. He joins me right now in studio. A very good morning.
How are you, Romeo and
Good to meet you once again.
Good morning to the viewers of NTV.
It's always a pleasure, Morrison. Now, help me understand. What were your major takeaways from yesterday's SEC elections?
I think, first of all, when you look at what happened, you see that NRM remains very much a dominant political party in the body politic of Uganda. Because if you look at the results, even before the SEC elections, you look at the youth elections, where NRM swept the entire vote. With over 79%. The elderly with over 86%. People with disabilities around that also 84%. So when you saw that, then you were like, okay, so what's going on here? We have had political actors and activists who have been going, holding the microphone, heavy on social media, saying that, this is a generational, time for a generation vote, beyond President Museveni, beyond NRM. But when you go to the numbers and see the youth voting, and you see them rejecting that biological narrative and sticking to the ideological narrative of President Museveni, then you see really something different. So I think, in my view, it's a vindication that NRM remains a very, very strong actor, and it's also a pointer to what is coming in February 2021. But the other aspect is, look for these political parties. Where are they? If you look at the numbers, again, that I'm talking about, NUP, for example, was in 0.0 something for all across those voting groups, special interest groups. FDC is only one that managed to secure a 1-point-something%. So actually the biggest force opponent to NRM politics in Uganda is not FDC, it is not NUP, it is not DP, it is not PPP, it is not political formations, it is not ANT of General Mugisha Muntu, it is the independents. Because for the independents, you would see that in a particular segment, they have 11%, they have 13%, they have 9% compared to to the NRM, which was scoring in 70s and 80s. So where are the political parties? So I think all this charade that we've been seeing around looks like it has no roots, it has no base, and I think, for me, the bigger lesson for the opposition political parties and those members in the other political parties other than NRM may want, instead of arrogance, instead of dismissiveness, take lessons, roll up the sleeves, and get to the grassroots and participate in house-to-house retail politics and mobilize. Instead of, I see them all over the place on social media, but looks like they are not on the ground and results are showing. Then you asked me a question with the SEC elections. One, first of all, I'm happy that NRM continues to deepen the idea that, positions in the policy-making organ of the party are contested, and that people are moving around the country. They did it very well scientifically and electronically, and congratulations really to those who succeeded, because they managed to reach out, to the delegates. And I think that this is like a precursor, because when you have all these elections going on, primaries and preparation and the colors and yellow and all this paraphernalia, it strengthens the base, it excites the base, and I think those people in NRM, are willing to go on and take it on in the coming election.
Of course, you mentioned something about the youth elections, political parties, especially in the opposition, losing so much, but then the independents triumphing.
Yes.
Will that mean that we are now seeing more of the growth of identity politics of identity? People are swaying away from that politics of political parties. Now they're looking out for individuals. What is causing this?
Well, first of all, that's not happening with NRM because if you look at the entire vote, clearly the majorities in the country are in the political formations, especially the NRM, but they are not in other political parties. So this is kind of the non-participation and the non-attractiveness is exclusive to other political parties and not the NRM. But the independents. I think the phenomenon of independence is that over the years, the trend line is that they have been even increasing in parliament. Those who are not affiliated to any persuasion, and most of the independents, the other thing, which is usually mentioned, although I've never defined it properly, is that they are also NRM leaning. You know, they are not in NRM per se, but they associate. So I think that has made politics of NRM, you know, very dominant. So, yeah, that's what I see.
With all that you saw with the NRM, the preparation and all, do you think that galvanizes their support to actually trounce the opposition in 2021?
Because you see, if you look at the numbers really coming in, that's why I ask this very important question. Where is the opposition? Why is it that all the noise that we hear about, all the coverage by that they receive a lot of coverage by Uganda's media, which I think is democratic and I think is abrasive in a way it reaches out. But when you go on the grassroots where people are, you know, they have no roots.
That's because of this scientific election, wouldn't you agree?
No, not at all. And there have been polls that have been saying, you know, 20% for some groups, but where is that percent? It's really not there.
See, even this,
and then you have
even before this election,
and you have
the opposition came out, Maurice, and they were saying the problem with the scientific election, we won't be able to reach out to the voters down there. That's why you're saying at the grassroots they are non-existent. But then we've seen NRM people continue with their activities unabated. Police wasn't stopping them, but then you saw opposition strongmen being stopped left, right, and center. So they were never able to reach the people because of this whole scientific nature of the election, and that's why they were so against it, and that's why you also yourself, Mr. Morris, petitioned to stop this election from going ahead. You're going to help me understand.
I never petitioned.
I want you to help me understand.
I have never petitioned.
For recommendations and so forth, but we are going to get into that, but continue.
No, I have never petitioned anybody to stop the elections. I'm actually a supporter of scientific elections and electronic.
But you wanted some recommendations to be included.
Electronic elections in a sense that because of the virus and the apparent clear and present danger that we face as a nation and as a world because of coronavirus. So certainly I am more inclined to, you know, reaching voters, you know, so in a socially distanced way and through other mechanisms. What I petitioned for was for access to the NSSF. So those are really two different things. And these electronic and scientific elections and participation is not only exclusive to the challenges faced by that is not only faced by the opposition but also the NRM. And I can tell you that I think the message of the opposition has been reaching out, you know, to the people electronically. I think even more than NRM, because remember, we have...
Because NRM knows only 20% of the population is online.
No. By the way, the biggest friend of people in the rural areas who actually do vote, most of us here in the city talk too much, but we never act to go and actually participate, line up and vote. But make no mistake is that you have all these radio stations that are localized across the country, and the biggest friend of the real people is the radio, because 86% of the population get their news and information on radio. But remember that this radio station, a radio station in Sole, a radio station in Karamoja, a radio station in Guru, a radio station in Mbarara, they really have no capacity to have the way you have all these bureaus across the country. You have got troops on the ground of journalists picking information. So when you post on social media, when the New Vision or the Daily Monitor comes up with a screaming headline, so this is syndicated by a radio unit solo because they have no capacity to source for this information. They translate it at no cost, at no fee, and speak in either in Runyankore or in Gisu or in Ruganda or in Chifumbira. And people get what you're talking about. You might find now that the radio station in Solo that has no capacity to source all this information is the same thing that they are translating to their people. So I think there are many ways through syndication that the messaging can actually go.
Talk about the people living in the border districts. You mentioned the issues in Chisoro and so forth. But what about the border districts? They do not get a signal at all from Uganda. It's from the neighboring districts.
No, I think
so.
that
How won't those people be left out in this election?
That's really a minority. That's an outlier. You know, when you're doing statistics on the bell curve, and then you have, you know, this middle mean. So most of the Ugandans within, in terms of the information coverage, are in the center, in the mean of the bell curve. They are not the outliers. So if you're talking about maybe sort of that have had some problems, but those problems have reduced. But make no mistake, the connectivity and coverage in this country compared to other countries in Africa is really amazing. Because if you look at over 17 million with access, you know, to internet, over 86% radio. Now most people also watch TV. If I go to my village in Nyibingu in Rukunjire, these small trading centers, you know, NTV at 9 and this morning show, you find people, you know, gathered, well, not socially distanced. There are still challenges there, but watching the news on TV. Then they go back to their radio, they go to their gardens with the radio. And remember, there is another aspect, that all the phones, whether they are smartphones or cabinet phones, they actually have FM radio. So I think there is a democratization of ferment of access to information. And I think it's up to the political actors, whether in NRM or the opposition, to harness these opportunities and be able to reach the masses. Then the other aspect is the messaging. In politics, messaging is everything. So I think perhaps the opposition political parties are also not crafting their messages properly to be able to reach the people and touch their hearts and soul such that they can belong and actually be inspired to participate and vote them.
Morrison Rakakamba, you could be rich in your village of Rukunjiri, but have you traversed other areas, especially in the north and the east? There are families that do not have radios. There are families that do not have TVs. That alone, there are families that do not have electricity.
You see, all over the world, it's always wrong to think in terms of perfections. That's why we think in terms of percentages. I told you that 86%, and this is a Afrobarometer study done by Goroba recently, which was launched at Hotel Africana. I'm talking about the latest numbers. Afrobarometer is suggesting that 86% of Ugandans have access to radio. But there is the other percentage, you know, of people who are not accessing. Let's say, you know, 14%. And those ones, perhaps, you know, we should struggle to make sure that they are also reached. And I think, yeah, that would happen. But I think it is safe for me to say that the majority of Ugandans, through many channels, you know, have access to meaningful information that should make them determined. And they are conscientized. Because this country is heavily political. Because if you look at over, I think, 3 million positions of elective offices, I think we're over-democratized. And over every 4 years, 5 years, you know, and we have this spate of by-elections, you know, people are participating at every level. You have, you know, the LCs. And you talked about the dominance of NRM. I forgot to mention that what I see now is actually validating the local council elections, you know, that happened mid this presidential term, where also NRM swept by over 85% villages across the country. This is where people are. So if you have a political party that is yellowing up the entire country at the village level, for me these elections are so important. Youth elections, LOC elections, because they are at the grassroots. They are not some high levels, you know, sub-county or district level or national level elections. These are local elections, and people are saying we are choosing NRM.
Well, Morrison, opposition contends that the reason they lost is because they did not have enough time or even resources to go out and reach the people at the grassroots. They were being suffocated by security apparatus. They were stopped in their midst. But then we saw NRM strongmen and women go about with their own business, reaching out to the, you know, that person right there deep in the village. But then,
and you know,
and you mentioned something. That's why, because you said you've been seeing opposition on online and NRM in the field. That's because Opposition, after being frustrated, they decided, you know what, let's go online because they cannot frustrate you there. They already tried with OTT. So as long as you have OTT, you can reach out to those people. So NRM having the financial muscles, they continue with their, activities on the ground, hence trouncing the opposition. Hence bringing me to this argument, selective application of the law. You've seen it happening. What is causing this and how best can we get it out of Ugandan politics?
You mentioned one important thing around resources. And I think Ugandans must know that first of all, as taxpayers, me and you, we fund political parties through the appropriation power in parliament. And they are getting billions of shillings, especially political parties under the rubric of iPod. So those are the political parties that have representation in parliament. Every other financial year, through the Ministry of Finance, in our national treasury, we fund NRM, we fund FDC, we fund DP, and GEMA, because, Asuman Basari also managed to make, a miracle show.
Indeed, and all these political parties have said the money is not enough.
So, what is enough in terms of money? They give you 1 billion today because of your needs. Tomorrow you say you need 2 billion. So how are you using the taxpayers' resources strategically to really be able to reach the people? So I think taxpayers across the country must know that as citizens, we are using our taxes to fund these political parties. But we are not funding independents. And I have just showed you statistically that in the just concluded elections, for youth, for elderly, for PWs, DIDs, the people with disabilities at the grassroots, that political parties, with the exception of NRM, have lost badly.
Because they are
and the independents, who are not funded by me and you, by the way. That's a very important distinction. We are not funding, because there's no political party called independents. But these independents, how come their message?
Even in 2016, they triumphed.
Yes, so how come their message is getting traction and is reaching the real people at the grassroots, and the message of FDC, and the message of DP, and the message of NUP, and the people power is not reaching?
Because it's not a united message. They are having some disorganizations within their party.
So really, I think we give these opposition parties a pass. And because they try blackmail and mostly really emotional.
What do you mean blackmail?
Yeah, because I don't know whether you have been watching them online. If you have an alternative view, they don't want to engage you. They are abusing you. They throw around, they are not very much interested in logic. And they assume that because they believe in certain tendencies, that then those tendencies should be believed by everybody else. So they don't take, a step ahead to go and engage, to go and convince, to share strategic messages, with the people. So the challenge I'm putting to you is that even in similar circumstances, because there is no ideal circumstance across the world, because, progress, development, moving forward is always work in progress. We are trying to perfect, a country. So there are all these challenges. But how come, even in those circumstances, okay, NRM and the independents are managing to reach, their message is reaching the people?
Because there is selective application of the law, Maurice Rwagakamba.
I'm talking about...
And that's what I wanted to task you on. What is causing selective application of the law and the implications of the same? Because we are seeing other political parties not having enough time.
What do you mean by selective application of the law? Because I am telling you...
Because in Koboko we shall see a precision, we shall also see a Chengho precision. But then if Bobby Wine wants to wave to a few people, he'll be thrown... tear gas into his car, people being whipped. You saw what was happening in Mbale.
I have seen a lot of people at Kamocha, at the People Power headquarters. A lot of paraphernalia going on. I don't accept that politicians and political parties, while doing their activities legally, should be commandeered, should be harassed. I'm not a believer in that. I think we should struggle across board to ensure that everybody plays by the same rules. And I think for those processions you're talking about and those mistakes, I have heard that people were summoned, for example, at the police, no matter, you know, which political party they belong to.
No, police say they are above the law.
Not at all.
That's a cabinet issue. I heard from the police spokesperson. That's what he said.
I cannot. In this country, there is nobody above the law. And if a policeman or a police spokesperson held the microphone and said some people above the law, then I can tell you that,
on national TV.
Then I can tell you I haven't seen that. But if that happened, then I think that Enanga must be in trouble, because
he said it's a cabinet issue and police cannot do anything.
Not at all. There is nobody who is above the law, as long as there are certain you know, standards. And I'm not saying that people don't flout laws, you know, across the political spectrum. But I think as citizens we must hold everyone accountable and ensure and pursue that nobody is above the law. And we expect institutions that serve us to be able to, you know, enforce the laws.
All right, what do you make of the violence that took place this week in the special interest elections, the youth elections this week? That violence, do you hope it will be replicated during the campaigns and even after the election?
I think that President Museveni was very clear while addressing the NEC members, addressing the NRM gathering. And he said that, you know, you don't have a right to abuse, you don't have a right to assault, you don't have, you know, because in politics, really, people have choices. And I don't think violence is the solution. What is the solution is engagement. It is messaging. It is setting an agenda. And if people like you and they want to vote you, then they should fall in line. So in emotive, usually during the politicization and the emotive campaigns and divide, people usually fall in different directions. And some are emotional, some are not emotional. So this is why I think it is important for leaders at whatever level to be able to pass on a message of peace, a message of reconciliation, a message of orderly participation in politics, really a message that is not stoking frames in people, that is not stoking divide, that is not stoking. I have been looking at a lot of banter on social media that tends to tribal, you know, stoking tribal sentiments, stoking lies, you know, that are aimed at really stoking those people whose nerves can be stoked easily to ride into violence. So leaders have a responsibility, in my view, to be able to pass on a message, you know, that brings people together rather than divide them. And usually during this political season, there is a tendency for leaders, you know, because they don't have a message, because they don't have a plan, because they don't have an agenda, you know, to fall into the easy way, the lazy way of stoking things like tribalism, of stoking, you know, sectarianism, of stoking those emotive and emotional, you know, elements. And my view is that really good leaders, or those who are in politics and they want to be our leaders, they should be our moral compass. They should have that the sacred heart, not the heart of danger. So I really want to call upon the leaders, and especially those who are going to be participating in the elections and electioneering, to be the lightning rod of peace and reconciliation, rather than to be the stalkers of, you know.
All right, Morrison Rakakamba, we do have my reporter Stephen Mbide on the ground to talk about the 12 years of Techno. But before we get to that conversation, I would like to task you on this. We do have political experts who are saying that President Museveni doesn't have much to do except to alleviate the negative effects of his governance, the corruption, the poverty, and so forth. Because these are the pointers the opposition is using to actually you know, fight against President Museveni. So there are people who are contending that for President Museveni to actually get rid of the opposition, you just have to get rid of the negatives, the poverty, build schools, build hospitals, and so forth, infrastructure. Just get rid of the corruption. What do you make of all this? Well, your final remarks, by the way.
My final remarks point to the fact that the president, under the agenda of, you know, Sanja Hakuna Mchezo, has been very serious on corruption, and I think the group that NACADEM has been leading in concert with other institutions like the IGG, you know, have really been on it. So the most important thing is to mobilize the people to be at the forefront of the fight against corruption. But this idea of modernization, I think, is important because if you look at the electricity base, I think now across Eastern Africa, Uganda, in terms of, you know, access to power, because the biggest cost center for businesses in this country is electricity. And I think this time, the president and NRM have focused very much on making sure that we have that enabler of electricity.
Indeed.
And if you move around the country, in the industrial parks and see the industries, the factories that are coming up and our young people who are getting employed there, I think what the president is saying is right. Now what we need is to deepen modernization, is to make sure that local investors and foreign investors
Morrison Rakakam,
get on
I'm
it,
afraid we've
and
run
we
out of
get
time.
these factories to work.
Indeed. I'm afraid you've run out of time. You've had some valid arguments, but you also understand where opposition is coming from when they talk about the insufficient...
But their message is not getting down.
Health sector,
they have been whitewashed.
The faltering education and so forth. You understand where they're coming from. They're not creating this. It's already there, and they're just mentioning the negatives that are already in existence.
There are challenges that we are working on to perfect.
All right. Thank you for coming, Morrison.